Welcome to the AVAIL podcast, where we dig deep and talk about the art of leadership. My name is Virgil Sierra, and today we're sitting down with Steve Jamison. Steve and his wife Cheryl serve as the lead pastors of East Ridge Church, a dynamic multi-site church based in Seattle, Washington. For years prior to pastoring, Steve served as an evangelist ministering on 6 continents. Today, Steve will share about his 2023 book release entitled The Most Valuable Catch, where he connects much of his ministry leadership success to the principles he learned growing up as a crew member on his father's boat. It truly is a compelling story, so lean in, leaders, and let's get started. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the AVAIL podcast, where we talk about leadership and life and how to get better at this art called leadership. My name is Virgil Sierra, lead pastor of Vertical Church, aka Iglesia Vertical in South Florida. We are one church, 2 languages. I'm your host every week for this podcast where we connect with amazing leaders. And today we have an amazing leader. He's a pastor. He's an author with an amazing new book. We're going to talk about it. None other than Pastor Steve Jamison. Pastor Steve, it's good to have you on the AVAIL podcast. How you feeling?
Virgil, it's great to be with you. Thank you for having me today. I'm looking forward to it.
Yes, sir. I think it's going to be a journey, and people are going to understand why I'm saying that. Pastor Steve, I love to start things off with having our guest just share a little bit about themselves. I think some people are going to be leaning in, especially with your story. You have a wonderful, creative, amazing God story, which we're going to hear more about your newest book. But I would love for people to learn a little bit about who is Pastor Steve Jamison, where is he, and what's he doing?
Well, thank you for that. One of the things about my life that's a little bit different than, normal is that I grew up in a commercial fishing family. And so my dad was a commercial fisherman. And, this wouldn't be allowed if it wasn't a father-son thing, but he took me to sea on the open ocean from the time I was 10 years old. I spent every summer on the ocean and ended up in Alaska fishing on his boat. A 5-man crew dropping 20 miles of gear every day, 5,000 hooks. If you've seen Deadliest Catch, you get a little glimpse of what we're talking about.
Wow.
And so that was kind of my background. I got thrown in as a boy into a man's world, and it was exciting. It was amazing. It brought me incredible things with my dad. And then I stepped into, actually received my call of God into going to ministry, fishing with my dad in Alaska. And that's a story that we talk about in the book, but ultimately followed that call, submitted to that call, and God began to open up new, fresh doors. I went into ministry, met my wife. We began in youth ministry, and then we took the next step to go into evangelism. And for about 15 years, we traveled the country and 6 different continents. And we started a ministry with some MBA friends of ours called Jamming Against the Darkness, and we started renting MBA arenas and doing outreach. And in the midst of that, we even assumed a call to be the pastors of East Ridge Church here on the east side of Seattle in Issaquah, Washington. So all of these journeys kind of converge, and that's why we're here talking about this book today.
I love it. Your story already resonates with me for a few reasons. I'm not a fisherman, I will say that, but I am the son of a man who loved God, of a pastor, and I love the NBA. I'm a Miami Heat fan. For anybody who's out there,
there you go.
We're rooting for him. But I'm interested in hearing more, and I know our AVAIL audience is going to be leaning in. We're going to talk about your book, your new book, The Most Valuable Catch. The most valuable catch, risking it all for what matters the most. I would love to just start off with, we heard kind of about your story. But why did God put in your heart to write this book?
People for years who have observed, these different aspects, they're like, you should write a book because people need to have this idea. And really the foundation of where the book starts and where it goes is really all about hearing the voice of God. And when I was in Alaska fishing with my dad, I wasn't even seeking for God. I was just working. I was just, a young guy in a tough environment, making good money. And, and in the middle of it, God interrupted me and spoke to me about going into ministry, which was something I never thought about, never, had on my radar.
Wow.
And So as that story unfolded, I began to learn the importance of how God does speak to us.
Hmm.
So that's where this book begins, is learning to understand that we serve a God that really does want to speak into our lives, and that he wants to develop confidence in us that we could go and take big steps. And so not only that, but the next thing that's really a motivator of this book is the environment where we're at, where loss of faith in leadership. I feel like we're in a great day of opportunity. I believe we could be seeing the stirring of a great revival. We obviously need it in our land, and yet there's
Yep.
obstacles and there's barriers to it. And so this book is to speak not only to every individual, men and women both, young people who have a dream tucked inside their heart. This is a book to help lead them to dream a dream bigger than they can imagine. But it also is designed to give them the underpinning of what a kingdom-centered life can really mean, in whether you're a university student or a business person. And so that's the journey of this book, is unfolding God's call, God's faith, how you fit in the midst of God's plan. And then, even talking about how do you really see God bless your steps? How do you see God's anointing and favor and just effectiveness come upon your life so you can leave a great legacy? That's where we're going.
Yeah, that's good. I think your story is incredibly unique. I don't know a lot of people who grew up on a commercial fishing boat or even that kind of world and lifestyle. So I think it's very intriguing to me, and I'd love to hear for you. I know without giving away, everything, because I think there's so much in there. But can you share maybe a couple of the lessons that you're able to kind of pour into this book from your experiences at this early age? And then connecting it to leadership, right? Because you're a pastor, you've been pastoring and leading now for many years, and I imagine as you were putting all this into print, right, in a book, I imagine it started coming alive for you.
Yeah, it's been fun. It's been exciting. Even just my dad. I would be calling him, and we would just be reminiscing about all the moments that we shared. One of my trips with my dad. Fishing tuna, was just the two of us, and we were out at sea for 40 days, the two of us, without seeing land, out fishing albacore tuna. And just that bond, just even as a young kid, having the opportunity to be able to be shoulder to shoulder with my dad in challenging times. There was one moment when we were out at sea, and it was early in the morning. We were in rough waters, and my dad is one of those kind of guys that nothing ever moved him. And I just had to, as a young guy out in a dangerous situation, I had to learn not to be afraid, not to worry about things. And I kind of developed this whole mentality that was, until he panics, I'm not panicking. But boy, if he panics, we're in trouble. And there was this early morning in the midst of these rough seas. And my dad, I was still in my bunk. I was asleep because it was just the two of us fishing tuna. And he would let me have a little bit of break early morning as he got things going. And so, I heard him. He ducked his head inside the deck house and he hollered. And I just could hear that there was something in his voice that you rarely heard. He goes, I need you right now. And so I jumped up. I just had, my underwear on basically. And I went running to the back of the deck house, and I looked out on the back deck, and these huge waves had filled the entire back of the boat, where the water on the deck was all the way to the top of the rails. And we have this big hatch at the center of the boat, which is never taken off unless you're in port, and it's tied down with ropes. But the power of these waves hit the boat with such force that it snapped the ropes on this huge hatch, and this hatch was ajar. And I just knew, looking at it, if we lose this hatch, if this hatch goes overboard, just think, the water is already to the top of this hatch, and the water would just flow into our boat probably faster than we could ever pump it out. And we were 1,000 miles plus off the coast. And so without even saying a word, we're out there in this driving rain. It's just going sideways because of the wind, and the boat's rocking and everything.
Wow.
And we had to wrestle that hatch back into place and pray that we had enough time before the next wave hit that we could even, grab the new ropes and lash that thing back down. So that was just one moment of, being at sea. Another thing I talk about in the book, I have a chapter on rocks sharks and drift. And one thing I loved about tuna fishing was, every night we have these high-powered halogen lights, that would light up the back deck and also the surrounding water. And on a nice night, out tuna fishing, the water is just crystal clear. It's kind of like Hawaii, and you could look down. And because we'd always have a little bit of blood and fish oil on our decks, because of just the way that we would take fish and process them from being on deck into our freezing units. So there would always be a little bit going over the side. And so every night, you had all kinds of sharks around the boat. And so here I am, just a young guy. And so when we got done with our work, I loved playing with the sharks. I mean, they would come up right and just even bump their noses against the side of the boat.
Wow.
And so I would take a small tuna and tie its tail with a tuna gannion, and I would just throw it as far as I could out over the top of where the sharks were. And when it splashes in the water, all these sharks start converging, trying to get to that fish. And I'm pulling on it as fast as I can, and the fish starts looking like it's water skiing on top of the water. And as it gets close to the boat, I jerk as fast as I can. The fish comes back out of the water, and the sharks would literally just lunge out of the water towards you.
Wow.
And, so that was my sport. That was my sport as a young guy fishing. And I could tell you shark stories, all day long. But.
My thought is, fast forward, right, from the boat, the tuna at sea, the tuna fishing with your dad. Now you're pastoring, and I can imagine, especially working on this book, you start making connections. Can you help us make a connection between a lesson learned on the decks of the boat with, for example, leading a church or leading people, leading a staff team? You mentioned also the difference. You mentioned to me before we got on the air, the difference between a 5-man crew, deep sea fishing in Alaska, a 2-man crew for tuna fishing. Make a connection here, because I think for some of us this is intriguing, especially those of us who lead people, churches, teams. I'd love to hear a connection that you've made through those stories in leadership. Are you ready to take your leadership to the next level? AVAIL is excited to announce that for a limited time, you can get a free 6-month trial subscription to the AVAIL Journal. The AVAIL Journal was created to equip and empower leaders with everything they need to excel. Read quarterly issues and pick up leadership wisdom from high-impact leaders like Sam Chand, John Maxwell, Tim Tebow, and dozens more. Take the first step in becoming a more effective leader. Sign up for your free 6-month trial subscription to the AVAIL Journal by visiting availjournal.com.
Yeah, that is a great topic. How do the things that we learn on the boat translate to everyday life and even leading teams? And one of the big things that I learned in Alaska, working on a 5-man crew, we fished 20 miles of gear every single day. Think about this. The boat never slept. The boat 24 hours. As a crew member, we were on deck 20 hours every single day. I mean, it's an all-out war. That things have changed a little bit from that moment to today. But this is what we were in. We were in a dangerous situation. The work was intense, and your focus was critical. And out of the midst of this, I learned about teams. And this translated to me even stepping in to work with NBA players. It stepped into leading the church. Here's the key. No great organization, no great business, no great church can operate with just one person. You need everybody's heart, vision going in one direction. And when you're in an intense situation like being on a deck of a boat, it is so important that there is a commitment to the mission, first and foremost, that you need a crew that you can depend on. You need to know that these guys are just as committed to your health and your well-being as you are to your own. Because when we launch gear, we launch an anchor that's going to go to the bottom. There's no way for us to stop it. So if a guy's leg or foot got wrapped up in a line, he's going to the bottom. There's no way for us to bring him back up. And so, every time that we're going to launch, we're watching out for each other. We're looking where each other are standing and where you see what I'm saying? The ropes are.
Yeah.
And in the midst of this, you got a boat that's pitching and rolling and water coming over the sides. And so you got to pay attention. And so this aspect of building a crew that's committed to each other. Another key thing is that we understood that nobody could do what we're doing long term. It was a
Mm,
season of time. And, nobody could go out there and endure this 20 hours a day, 365 days a year. It's impossible.
mm,
And so we translate this into business. We translate this into our church culture. Yeah, there's going to be times when it's all hands on deck. You can't be just worried about your silo. You can't just
mhm,
be worried about your part. You've got to be worried about or concerned about the overall good, the real vision. In our church, it's church first. It's not just what
mhm.
serves youth or children, worship. No, it's what serves God's great mission. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And we're going to find times when we're going to find somebody who's struggling. We want to build a culture that you don't struggle alone. If you've got a need, you speak up, and
Mm,
your crewmates, your teammates are going to come and give you their very best. And that's what makes a great crew: commitment to the mission, commitment to each other, understanding the ups and downs, giving your best, and then the aspect also of just encouragement. I'll tell you a quick story. There was a time where I had a guy fishing with us who was a powerfully built young man, and he was at that time frame he was an alternate to the U.S. Olympic team in cross country skiing. So the guy was in shape.
mm,
And where we fish in Alaska, there's just a few hours of darkness, probably even just sometimes just an hour and a half or so. And yet that darkness, when you're working like that, just that darkness makes you feel the intensity of it. And so here's this powerfully built young guy. We're dressing halibut right in the middle of the mid decks. And I see him start to, stop his work and put his hands out on the hatch. And he looks over at me. He goes, "Man, I'm done. I don't have anything left." And then he says, "Hey, grab a hook rack. Come over here." And so there's a hook rack is a piece of metal that we, hang hooks on when they come back on board. And so it's a pipe. And so I took this pipe over, and he goes, "Hit me." And I go, "You got to be kidding me. What are you talking about?" He goes, "No, hit me. I'm just aching through my shoulders. Just hit me." And so here I am with a pipe hitting my buddy, through his shoulders, trying not to hit his backbone or his shoulder blades. But I loosen him up just enough so he can keep going. A little while later, I look, and he's back. He's stretching out over the hatch. And this time he said, "Man, I got nothing left." Well, my dad was working on the what's called the roller. It's the side of the boat, and it takes the brunt of the weather and the intensity of it before it hits any of the rest of us. And a
mm.
lot of captains wouldn't even be there at mid deck; they would be up in the pilot house. But my dad wanted to be on deck, so I learned hands-on impact of
Wow.
not just being the guy in the deck house, but he led the boat, ran the boat from midship, so he could be with his crew. And so he sees this moment happening on the deck, and he's running the boat. It's so intense, but he took a chance, and he stepped away for just a moment. He leaned over to where Chris was, and he looked him right in the eye, and he just said, "Chris, you are becoming a great fisherman." And then he turned around and went right back to his place. And that just, I write about this in the book. That was like a bolt of adrenaline going through Chris's heart. And this young, powerful guy just stood up, grabbed his gaff hook, and went, what was inside of him was, "Man, I love this guy. He is a man's man. He's a leader of leaders. And he's just telling me, I'm not going to quit. I'm not going to give up. He believes in me, and he stood up." And so all these things are so true. People need encouragement. They need to know that
Yeah.
the leader is for them and with them and concerned about them. And so we carry all these things into life and ministry.
Yeah, that's good. I think one of the things that people have a hard time with is trust with leadership. And I know we were talking about this as we were preparing, but the aspect of so many people have lost trust in leaders, in leadership. And I know that this is something that comes up as well as a theme in the book. Can you share with us a little bit about that?
Yeah, this is a huge thing. Like you said, people have lost faith in government, education, corporations, and sadly, too many times now, spiritual leaders. And so we talk about a sacred trust, and that's why writing this book, I wrote it in mind that I would want every pastor and every leader to say, "Wow, when I look through this book, I find the keys to the kingdom, what it is to live a meaningful life." And even to understand behind the scenes, kind of pull the curtain back and show what really makes a difference in today's world, in today's church. So I teach this concept of the restoration of the sacred trust. And the point is that leadership is a trust. And it is in every place, in business, government, every place. It's you're being entrusted with the opportunity to impact people's lives.
Yep.
And if you take that trust and you just use it as something to benefit yourself, if you're just about how much money you make or how much applause you get, you're not going to have that mentality that I'm talking about with building a crew and building a real mission. And
Yeah.
and there's a sacred trust to leadership, and that is this: as a spiritual leader, our first call is obviously to honor God and to live our lives in a real relationship with Him. We need to be people in the Word. We need to be people with a heart of authentic worship. We need to be transparent with God, and really, taking to heart that He's entrusted us with the greatest thing that there is. That's why we call this the most valuable catch. It's risking it all for what really matters. It's not money. We made a lot of money fishing. It's not about just that manhood thing on the decks. This is a moment for men and women. This is an aspect of kingdom where every single one of us have a calling in our life. Every single Christ follower is a leader. You have influence. And so the first call of us as a leader is to honor God, but then secondly, to honor our people, to love our people, to care about our people. You heard me just tell a story about my dad not being up in a deck house, but being right there with the people. This is another aspect of this sacred trust of leadership: caring for your people, loving your people, business, particularly in ministry. The second aspect of the sacred trust, it's a two-sided coin, is that the people, the followers, the people of God have to do the same thing. I think a lot of times we have this disconnect. This is the perspective of what our pastor ought to do. This is what our spiritual leader, they ought to live accountable. They ought to watch what they let in their life. They should be careful to be, living out the scriptures. And people let their standard be somewhat below their leaders. I'm saying, no, that's not your call. Your call is to live your life fully unto God. And this is not a time to back away from the church. It's not a time to say, I don't need church. I can get what I need on a podcast while I'm working out at the gym. The body of Christ is built upon the people of God. And so the sacred trust is each one of us honoring God and then loving each other. And if we could get the entire body, once again, to live as God would have each believer live, but then have them love their leaders as well. And it's a two-way street. The leaders have got to lead so people can believe in them. But, there's another thing that happens in this process of restoring trust is that Christian leaders and Christian people we say this in our church, you need to set your default that I trust my leaders instead of, oh my gosh, what's wrong here? Or what's going on?
Right.
You say, you know what? I know their character. I know who they are. I know their vision. I know where we're going. I want to get behind this. And leaders need people in their church who will lead well right with them, come alongside. And I think we could see amazing things happen if we could restore the sacred trust.
That's so good. I love the concept of restoring a sacred trust, because I think that's one of the strategies of the enemy to get us to not trust, which leads us to not even trusting God sometimes. This is great. I'm curious, as you were talking, I'm curious now, specifically about the title of your book, The Most Valuable Catch. Why did you name it The Most Valuable Catch?
Well, that title just comes from the aspect of really having a life that knows what you need to, what is the most important for you to focus on. And coming out of the fishing industry, it's an industry where guys are there for one big reason, and they want to make money and they want to make it quickly. The second thing is that sense of crew and camaraderie, all those kinds of things. And what I'm trying to say is I've been in that environment, and I can tell you that the adventure, the money, the challenge, that's all secondary. The most important thing you could ever do with your life is to live it honoring unto God. The most valuable thing you could ever do is be a part of not only you honoring God with your life, but helping someone else find Christ. Working with even NBA players, I love this because these guys, were some of the highest paid players. They were, MVPs, tremendous guys. And yet when we came down to doing a jamming event, we would rent an NBA arena. We'd set up half court on one end, a rock and roll stage on the other. We brought in top, contemporary Christian music, guys like Toby Mac and Third Day and Newsboys, you name it. And, Fred Hammond and different guys on the African American gospel side, Israel Houghton, just great people coming together. But we would bring in mascots, and they would shoot T-shirts, and we would have the guys come out and do 2-ball, 3-point shootout, throw down some dunks. But then we would give them a handheld wireless mic, and out on the court, we would give them the opportunity to just talk about what Jesus meant to them. And it was the most amazing thing.
Wow.
Because we never paid an athlete. They recruited each other. They loved the moments that we had where we prayed together, where they shared their faith and their testimony, not only with each other, but then with an arena full of people. And this is where this whole most valuable catch moment comes in.
Wow.
Because these guys realize we have a platform, we have all of these other things, and they have all the confidence in the world to go out and play a game or do an exhibition. But the moment you put the mic in their hand, it was like it went up another notch, because they realized, wait a minute, nothing compares with the opportunity to share your life that someone else may come to know Christ. And this is in business. I could tell you stories. One of the chapters in the book is about no empty hooks. And I talk about the principles of the kingdom. And that's why I believe that this is a book for every individual, men and women. Women have loved the book, who have pre-read the book. They tell me, Pastor Steve, I stopped 3 times and wept because this book is so impactful.
Wow.
And but I talk about no empty hooks. Think about that. As I mentioned, we fished 20 miles a year, 5,000 hooks in Alaska. And what I say is, a lot of times in today's world, people, they don't understand the kingdom. And they're frustrated because they work so hard and they feel like they have so little to show for it. And what I'm saying is, that's like going to Alaska and going through all the headache and pain to lay out 5,000 empty hooks with no bait, lay it on the ocean. Which among us, who would do that? Who would lay out 5,000 hooks and expect that there was going to be a harvest? And yet we do this in our spiritual lives. We go to work in our business. We own great businesses, or we manage great business, or we work there. And many times in our lives, we don't know the aspect of the secrets of the kingdom. What is God going to honor? What's going to make the difference between always being frustrated, feeling like we're not getting anything for our hard work? And what I'm saying is, if we learn the keys of worshiping God, if we learn the keys of 2 Corinthians 9, you have to sow to reap, and it's got to come from a joyful heart. How does a joyful heart come? Only when it's worship. And so there's this dynamic of the kingdom that comes in, where the dreams of God percolate in a person's heart. And this is what I'm writing about in this book: hearing the voice of God, getting confidence that God really does speak to you. I had a young couple today who are entrepreneurs with me, talking about, taking that next step in their business and how it was scary. And I said, I know, I'm just writing about this, but God wants you to know you are hearing from him. And it's time to untie, and it's time to go to deeper waters. Because if we're not willing to take that step of faith, if we're just satisfied to stay in the harbor, you and I know we have just capped everything that God could do in our life. But if we're willing to trust God's voice in our life, and untie and head straight up, even into the wind of the waves, we're going to see God do some amazing things.
That's so good. That's so good. This has been great, Pastor Steve, because I think it's a unique perspective to godly kingdom principles, leadership principles connected to great stories. This is such a creative idea. I'm so thankful the Lord put this on your heart. I want to help people know how they can get it. I know, at the time of this recording, it's summer of 2023. People might hear it even later, but where can people find the book? Where can they connect with you?
Yeah, the best place to go to get the book is just simply the name of the book, themostvaluablecatch.com. And all the resources will be there. And I just appreciate that. And the thing that I'd love for everybody to see, this book is for men and women, It's for business leaders. It's for church leaders, but it's really going to help build your kingdom life. And it's more than a book. It's really a project. We have 9 master classes that come along with it, a study guide,
Yes.
and it's really built to be that tool to help you reach for the very best in your life.
Yeah, you guys heard it. The most valuable catch.com, correct?
Yes, I think that's the best place to come.
Yeah.
You can get a hardback copy from us at themostvaluablecatch.com. You can
Mm-hmm.
get all of the bundled, from an ebook to an audio book to the study guide and the master classes. It will be available on other platforms like Amazon and different places, all over the place. But I would really encourage people to come to
Yeah.
themostvaluablecatch.com and just be with us directly to get the very best deals.
Yeah, you can get the book, you can get the study guide that goes along with it, and obviously you'll have access. If you go for the bundle, you have access to those masterclass videos, which is a great touch to walking through this book. I think a lot of people are going to really enjoy this, Pastor Steve, and I also hope it inspires other people to write about their stories, their God stories.
Amen.
Speaking of resources, I want to mention the AVAIL Journal. You're familiar with the AVAIL Journal. In fact,
Yes.
you have an article coming up, right?
Yes, I'm excited about that. It's coming out here in July.
Yes, July 2023. Our AVAIL Journal, for those of you who are watching or listening for the first time, or maybe you're new or you haven't done it, you can claim your free annual subscription by going to availjournal.com. We want to cover it for you, the first 4 editions for you. This is a great resource with a myriad of contributors and pastors and authors like Pastor Steve Jamison, who wrote an article for the next one. If you haven't gotten it, go for it. It's free. It's on us for the first year. This is going to help you on your leadership journey. It's so important. Would you agree, Pastor Steve, that it's important to have resources?
Absolutely. And not only that, but that is so well done. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not like just another magazine that you would pick up someplace. It's got the heavier stock. It's like something that you would see on the table at a resort. It's really something that you could use and be helpful to your friends. And Virgil, if I could say one last thing about the book, it's that spiritually, I love what we've also done. All the way through the book, it not only weaves the story of my background and experience, but we tell the story of Barnabas and how God can speak to a person's life and prompt them. And all the aspects of the book are lived out in the life of Barnabas and how he engages Saul. He has to take that chance when nobody else would believe that Saul, the Apostle Paul, was for real. When the revival broke out in Antioch, this is that place of not only the sacred trust, but shared leadership. Barnabas could have just been the man. He could have been the preacher and teacher and had the love of the people, but he felt the prompting of the Spirit. Someone else needed to be in the mix. And so he took the chance and brought Paul into Antioch and shared leadership, shared the love of the people, shared opportunities. And there was a multiplying effect that came into the kingdom. Writing this book is what it's all about, is that pastors would see people come alongside of them, and we could create this multiplying effect for the kingdom right now. And my little challenge is, if it wasn't for Barnabas and his willingness to do all the steps we talk about in the book, would we even know the name, the Apostle Paul? So there's something here for everybody. You can be a world changer. You can make a difference no matter where you are in your life.
That is a solid word to close on. You can make a difference. You can be a world changer. I love this. Pastor Steve, this has been an awesome opportunity to get to know you a little bit and also to get to know about your book. Themostvaluablecatch.com, everybody. That's the website where you can not only get the book, but get the bundle. I encourage you to get the whole bundle, which includes the study guide, access to the masterclass videos, the audiobook, just great resources. We appreciate this. Pastor Steve, on behalf of the AVAIL team, Dr. Sam Chand, Martijn van Tilborg, everybody who's behind the scenes, we honor you, brother. We're thankful for you, and we can't wait to see what God's going to do with this book.
Thank you so much. What a privilege to be with you. Thank you for all you're doing. God bless you.
Awesome. I hope you've been encouraged by this episode of the AVAIL podcast. Pastor Steve Jamison and his new book, The Most Valuable Catch. You got to check it out. Go to themostvaluablecatch.com and see all the resources available to you. On behalf of AVAIL, my name is Virgil Sierra, lead pastor of Vertical Church in South Florida, your host for these AVAIL podcast every single week. A new one comes out where we talk leadership, we talk life, we talk how these principles can help you along your leadership journey. It is the art of leadership. We will catch you next time right here on the AVAIL podcast. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the AVAIL podcast with our guest, Steve Jamison. You can find out more about Steve on social media and by going to themostvaluablecatch.com. For more leadership resources, check us out at theartofleadership.com. And make sure to claim your free annual subscription of the AVAIL Journal at availjournal.com. As always, I'm your AVAIL podcast host, Virgil Sierra. Muchas gracias. Thank you for connecting with us to learn the art of leadership here at the AVAIL podcast.